So at this point, the main stories for Project Sekai have come out a long time ago. The characters are long past that time in their lives. And to be fair, I don't think anyone is championing any of the main stories as the best, especially when compared to some of the event stories that have come out. A lot of the stories in Project Sekai have improved as time went on, but I wanted to talk about them now because I feel like it's important to address the series' beginnings, because I do believe they served as the foundation for what was to come. I'm going to be blunt. I don't like Wonderlands Showtime's main story, but you probably guessed that from the title of the video. Before I start, I want to make it clear that this is just my opinion. If you're able to enjoy Wonderlands Showtime's main story, that's great. Like with most of these stories, it is hinging upon getting the audience to like these characters we follow. Only problem is, yeah, most of these characters are not great. Funnily enough, the one that's constantly painted as the weird narcissist in the beginning actually ends up being the most likable character, in my opinion. None of these characters are fun to watch. I'm either left confused or aggravated by their antics. Tsukasa was the only character who really worked for me. Tsukasa's introduction in the opening is fascinating. Technically, his flashback in the beginning is the reason why he wants to become a star. So the whole time, the audience knows what Tsukasa is missing, but he doesn't. I thought that was pretty cool. After the flashback and Tsukasa's grown self starts talking, you can pretty quickly get a feel for who he is. He's weird, evidenced by him loudly talking to himself. He may even come across as arrogant, but what's interesting is that when Saki enters the picture, he takes the time to ask about her health, indicating what a caring big brother he is. Also, if you read Leonide's story first like I did, you'll know that when Saki was down with a fever, Tsukasa took the time to cheer her up with the musical. This is some good stuff. The way these two sides of his character are balanced, the egotistical side, but also the one who clearly loves his family and goes above and beyond for them, builds intrigue to his character and makes me want to know more about him. Clearly, there's more to him than meets the eye. He has depth to him that the rest of his troupe mates lack, and boy does it show, especially later on in the event stories. Then, when Saki asks him, we find out that Tsukasa doesn't actually remember why he wants to become a star. Why? Who knows? Maybe it will be answered later. In episode 2, we get a neat little nugget of information that Tsukasa does remember that flashback moment, but remembers more so how amazing the lead actor looked. Interesting stuff. Once again, I like this because it makes me want to keep watching so I can get these answers. Tsukasa gives a showboaty answer to Saki to keep the conversation going, but privately continues to ponder to himself why he decided to become a star. And I think this one scene right here tells you a lot about Tsukasa. He doesn't want to worry his sister by talking about these things. He gives the answer he's expected to give, and his sister buys into it. This could imply that part of his showman persona is a farce that he may even be putting on subconsciously. That's more speculation, but once again, it builds intrigue. To me, this feels like smart, tight writing. Well done, Project Sekai writers. I'd go as far to say that Tsukasa is the most interesting when he's away from the other Wonderland Showtime characters. To be fair, they're all more interesting on their own, but this really shows with Tsukasa. When he's away from his troupe mates, he's allowed to grow and reflect. His group members just stifle him and force him into a box. This role he has to play, the scripted anime character that gives the most predictable reactions to everything, and that's boring! It really feels like I'm supposed to be okay with everything that Tsukasa's forced to go through, Emu and Rui's antics, Nene's insults, because of how egotistical and overconfident he's presented to be. Like, oh okay, it's funny because he needs to be taken down a notch. And that's not how it works. I get why Tsukasa may appear to be a little annoying, but being annoying is not a good reason to bully someone like this. Being annoying doesn't give anyone the right to treat someone this way. What makes it weird to me is that Tsukasa is constantly punched down and labeled as obnoxious, when the rest of Wonderland Showtime is just as obnoxious? Yet they're not nearly as made fun of as Tsukasa is. Why? This type of gag only works when everyone is made fun of, not just one person. In episode 8, they all make fun of the name that Tsukasa comes up with for their troupe, Pegasus Soaring in the Sky Troupe, as if Wonderland Showtime is any better. When Emu suggests equally, if not more so, ridiculous names, Nene and Rui don't gang up on her, but they gang up on Tsukasa? Rui suggests they base the name off of Emu's wish because Emu's wish is so pure and amazing, I guess, and later says that sometimes it's better to go with your first thought. Tsukasa even points out Rui's hypocrisy that they couldn't go with his first thought. Don't worry, Rui's hypocrisy only gets worse and is never addressed besides this weird lamp shading, which is actually more insulting in my opinion. With Tsukasa, they end up trying to do this Komi Boken thing, where someone says something stupid and then the reasonable person slaps them for it, but it doesn't work because Tsukasa will say something reasonable, but then for some reason, he's the one getting slapped. It makes no sense, and if this was supposed to be a clever inversion, it's just confusing and even less funny than the original premise. We get introduced to Tsukasa first, and then we meet Emu next. She sure is something, to say the very least. It's so weird because I know the game is trying to get me to see her as this cute, energetic little ball of sunshine, except then she does things like ignore Tsukasa when he's talking. In episode 2, Tsukasa talks about his ambitions, Emu completely ignores him and brings up something else. This is the loving and empathetic one, guys. Assault Tsukasa and ignore his wishes. In episode 2, Emu grabs on Tsukasa's collar, preventing him from leaving. Assault? There's even a choking noise? Tsukasa literally says he can't speak and is wheezing? Throw a tantrum as if she's 5 and not 15 when she doesn't get what she wants. In episode 2, Emu whines and cries like a child, begging Tsukasa not to leave, as if he's about to go get milk forever, which is not endearing. Touch Tsukasa's phone without permission. I feel like I shouldn't have to point out why this is a major violation of boundaries, but yeah, you know. Force him to join her troupe against his will. In episode 4, Tsukasa only agrees to be part of the troupe to get out of the Sekai. These are not genuine beginnings. And if I want to expand on this point a little more, I think it's fine if these are not genuine beginnings, because these are beginnings and like later the troupe falls apart. So it would be fine if these weren't genuine beginnings, except they were able to like reach a place of like understanding later, but they never do. So it makes stuff like this, these insults in the very beginning, it makes it seem like a huge insult because none of these concerns ever get addressed. The mascot thinks Tsukasa tried to kidnap Emu because he saw what happened on his hidden camera. Tsukasa asks why a park mascot even has that, which is reasonable, but forget about that. Then the mascot starts straight up assaulting him. Instead of looking any kind of worried, all Emu does is puff out her cheeks and say, "No fighting," like a toddler. What a piece of work. The mascot threatens Tsukasa into agreeing to work with Emu, literally grabs onto him like a barbarian to get him to perform with Emu. Tsukasa even points out that this is coercion, but do these psychos care? Of course not. Does no one else think this is weird? I want to remind you guys that Emu does not know Tsukasa at this point in time. They are practically strangers, yet she continues to overstep boundaries as if they're good friends. She does this comedic thing where she ignores every one of Tsukasa's reasonable misgivings or his reluctant attitude and basically strong-arms him into joining her. But no, I guess this is simply cute, quirky anime behavior that I just don't understand. Listen, just replay any one of Emu's actions and think to yourself how it would go down in real life. All she does is whine and cry but not actually do anything. After the mascot and Emu wrangle an agreement out of Tsukasa, Emu immediately asks what their first show will be, putting all the work onto Tsukasa. It's Tsukasa that makes Emu get more members because Emu is incapable of using her little pea brain. Her noggin up there is non-functional, apparently. In episode 20, Tsukasa is the one to point out that her dad must expect them to keep using the stage. Emu says, yeah. So, did she just assume that they'd all agree to keep performing with her? What was her big plan if that all fell through? This girl does not think, and it's infuriating. The game officially describes her as all happiness and innocence, as if she's physically incapable of thinking of anything else. It's no wonder the fanbase infantilizes her so much when the official source material does so already. The game also tries to pretend that Emu is super empathetic by giving her this weird sixth sense sort of thing. In her introduction, all Emu hears is this random boy talking about incredible shows, and apparently she just knows that Tsukasa will draw the crowds in and help her restore the Wonder Stage. Oh, but it's Emu! She has a sixth sense! My suspension of disbelief can only go so far, you know, especially when you consider just how obnoxious and selfish Emu is. In episode 10, Emu uses magical Wonderhoy powers to determine that Nene is sad. That's my only conclusion, because I refuse to believe that she's empathetic. They almost make it like a sort of superpower instead of integrating it into her character in a natural way. Like, instead of giving a reason for it, maybe something in her childhood, or the way she was brought up, she just has it. And it activates on a whim. This is why it's so hard for me to believe that she's this empathetic, caring person, because she just isn't. I've listed so much of her behavior that proves that she isn't, but the game expects me to ignore all of this because she has what is basically psychic superpowers. In the end, her selfish, childish behavior is never addressed. It is never even seen as an issue. She gets everything she wants. The troupe gets back together, the stage is saved, and she does nothing to earn it. She really is the group's princess, and not in a good way. She's spoiled and entitled and doesn't understand the meaning of no. It doesn't help that everyone around her has to cater to her every whim. I'm going to move on to Nene next, and save Rui for last because boy do I have things to say about him. We first meet Nene when Tsukasa's walking on the street, being loud as per usual. We see her think, geez, what a weirdo, better go home. And you know what? That's fair. I would do the same because it's a reasonable reaction. Unfortunately, the next time we meet her, that slight bit of reason has vanished into thin air. Rui mentions a fourth member and that she's not very good at talking. She's shy. Cut to a robot standing in front of the gang. Emu seems to take this in stride, but Tsukasa is understandably concerned. How is this robot going to perform on stage? How is it going to move around? Who's controlling this robot? So many questions. Luckily, Rui seems to have made the robot specifically for stage performances, with all sorts of built-in functions, and it can move and perform with ease. So that's good. No, it's extremely weird, and Tsukasa has his misgivings, but everyone just ignores him, which becomes a common occurrence in their future dynamic. So this robot is controlled by this girl named Nene, who is too much of a coward to show her face in front of others. Why, you may ask? Well, it all started when she joined a theater company in middle school. She eventually landed a leading role for a performance, but on the day of, she froze and was unable to recall her lines, messing the entire thing up for everyone. Since then, Nene has had intense anxiety about standing on stage and performing in front of people. But this is something that Tsukasa and Emu learn only after their first performance together. At this point, all they know is that some weird robot that's apparently being remotely controlled by someone is their new member. Almost immediately after voicing his pretty reasonable concerns, Nene Robo starts going off on Tsukasa, and then they fall into this one-sided anime-like banter with each other far too quickly and easily, with Nene constantly giving quips and snide remarks. And I say one-sided because this really just feels like Nene being so unnecessarily rude to this person whom she has just met. She even jokingly threatens him? What? In episode 8, Nene takes some random pot shot, and you can see that Tsukasa actually looks pretty bothered. This is not banter. You never see Tsukasa going at Nene with the same intensity like this. You'd think she'd act a little more polite in front of the troupe she wants to join, but I guess that's too much to ask of Queen Nene. And all of this is coming from a person who can't even show her face to them. Is this similar to the power of online anonymity? Nene's like one of those people who constantly talks big online when she can't even ask for extra ketchup when she's ordering food. Please!
Hi there. I lost?
Rui, oh Rui, I feel like I could make an entire video outlining why he's easily the worst member of the Wonderlands Showtime cast, the entire game even. So we first see him in episode 1 where he takes note of Tsukasa. Rui takes note of Tsukasa, thinks he's unusual, and then decides to perform there, thinking they'll run into each other.
That's suspicious. That's weird.
He basically orchestrates Tsukasa catching sight of him at Phoenix Wonderland. I don't know why the writers didn't just make it a coincidence that Rui happened to be performing there at the time, so Tsukasa was able to take note of him, because this actively sours Rui's first appearance. Rui comes across as creepy and sad here. If you want to talk to the guy, just do it. Rui is lucky that he latched onto Tsukasa of all people, because Tsukasa is the one who puts in the effort to hunt down Rui. Tsukasa tracks Rui down to the roof, and Rui reveals that he had a drone follow Tsukasa all day? Creeper! He saw Tsukasa struggle to find him, and instead of going up to him like a normal person, he stalks him. Okay, Project Sekai. Keep in mind that we know Rui is interested in talking to this dude. We've known this as early as episode 1. Him stalking Tsukasa in the beginning is weird. Am I supposed to find this quirky? Cute? Because it's just weird, gross, and manipulative. He basically pre-orchestrates their meeting, but makes it look like it was just a coincidence, or it was just due to chance. But it wasn't. It really just rubs me the wrong way, and the more that I think about it, it feels really underhanded and suspicious. In episode 6, Tsukasa basically has to act like a dog in order to appease Rui and get him to join, insisting that he can follow Rui's lead and live up to his expectations. It sets up really uncomfortable standards that only get exploited later, which brings me to my next thing. Him pushing Tsukasa's boundaries is not funny. Rui and Tsukasa's dynamic is not fun to watch. It feels like Rui will suggest things, except not really, because he'll just threaten to leave if Tsukasa doesn't agree, while Tsukasa has to begrudgingly give his consent for the sake of the best show, while Rui just acts obnoxious, insufferable, and continues to push boundaries and do things that no one asks for. In episode 9, Rui wants lightning for some reason? Why? Doesn't that seem like a safety hazard that could seriously get someone injured? Doesn't it seem a little excessive for a show performance at an amusement park? Is it really necessary to generate actual lightning for the best show possible? Aren't there other alternatives? If you ask any of these questions, screw you, I guess. You and Rui just aren't compatible, because who's ever heard of actual discussion, working through your problems, and compromise, right? Rui brings a dangerous device and doesn't seem to prioritize Tsukasa's safety at all. Tsukasa refuses to be Rui's monkey, clearly setting the boundary that he won't risk his life. But Rui just throws Tsukasa's quote back in his face and immediately steps down. This is like a textbook manipulation tactic. He uses Tsukasa's own words against him, extrapolating them to mean something he didn't. He uses Tsukasa's own words against him, extrapolating them to mean something he didn't. Yeah, Tsukasa said he would meet Rui's expectations, but he didn't mean at the risk of his own life. This also implies that Rui doesn't understand the meaning of revoked consent, the idea that someone can consent to something, but then change their mind at any point, and the other person has to be okay with that because that's how consent works. I think colleges are wasting their consent orientation modules and should be giving it to someone like Rui instead, because clearly he doesn't understand basic concepts like these. So then, Tsukasa compromises for the sake of a good show. Rui then suggests more extremely dangerous ideas, a flamethrower, launching Tsukasa 10 meters via air jet in the floor. Do any of these meet safety standards? Tsukasa agrees because they would wow the audience, and as a true star he should rise to the challenge, but it doesn't feel like Tsukasa agreeing because he wants to, and it feels more like he's only agreeing because he thinks he should. This doesn't feel like the foundation for a good friendship, or any sort of friendship for that matter. In episode 9, Emu, talking about Rui's dangerous shenanigans, says it sounds fun, like a weirdo. Tells you a lot about her as a person, and nothing good. For some reason, Nene implies that the problem is that there aren't more people like Emu, and not that Rui's a weirdo and needs to rethink his priorities. Actually, this one line pretty much defines Wonderland's Showtime as a whole. Everyone else is the problem, not me. Even when all the signs are pointing to me as the problem, it's all of you guys that are the problem. What a childish, delusional mentality to support. Like, sorry that most people have the self-respect to not put themselves through Rui's BS. In episode 10, Rui wants to run experiments on a plushie like a creep. I'd say Rui's heading down criminal territory if he wasn't already one. And the fact that he wants to dissect or hurt something made from Tsukasa's true feelings, these implications are rough, man, and I'm not even writing them. Project Sekai did all the work for me. In episode 11, we hear this horrible sound effect where Rui strains Tsukasa's body. Yeah, are we sure Rui cares about this guy? Rui reveals at the end that Tsukasa implemented all of his stage directions. All of them. And then compliments him. So, like, does he only give a compliment because Tsukasa did whatever Rui wanted? Manipulation 101. Oh, but there was nothing more infuriating than what happened in the main conflict. So we're off to a great start when Emu says that Nene shouldn't feel bad, when she absolutely should. Rui doesn't even try to comfort Nene, saying that he charged the robot. That's all. Emu at least tries to comfort Nene, but all Rui has to say is that. Awesome. So Nene's all apologetic, what happened to that arrogant attitude from earlier, but it's a little late for that now. The show is already ruined. Tsukasa says her apology is not enough, and he's right. As Tsukasa says, these people will never come back. Tsukasa explains his reasoning, that they have to make each show a success, and this reveals the standards that Tsukasa holds himself to. But remember, he just wanted to get through the play properly and let the kids leave laughing. This failure, and for such a stupid reason, in Tsukasa's point of view, made it look like Wonderland Showtime just didn't care. Which I can buy since Nene was being ridiculous and the others were just messing around the whole time. Nene rightfully points out that she shouldn't have relied on the robot, and Tsukasa tears her a new one. It's great to watch. What he says isn't even bad, he's right.
司くんやめてくれ。
ごめんなさい。
ねね。
Can you hear my eyes roll?
今のは言い過ぎじゃないか。
Because that's going too far, apparently. Not the stunts that Rui makes him go through, not the abuse that Nene hurled at him during rehearsals. You know what? I think Tsukasa was completely justified in saying what he said, and unlike Rui, I don't blame him for saying the way he said it either. Think about it. This girl who has done nothing but insult him and belittle him since day one, who has never even bothered showing her face until now, had one job, and she couldn't even do that. I would be upset too. In episode 7, Tsukasa notes how confrontational Nene is. This is how Nene comes across to Tsukasa, and it's not a good look. But no, suddenly Nene, the girl who's been spouting insult after insult, suddenly breaks down in tears after being rightfully confronted. Oh, what happened to all that bravado, Nene? What happened to the girl who was all like, haha, scared I'll take your place? Nene is all bark and no bite, and it makes it really hard to respect her as a character. Nene has been so rude, but then the minute Tsukasa rightfully calls her out, tears, crying, I'm so sorry. Nene gets turned into the victim, the frail, shy little girl, while Tsukasa's the big bad aggressor? Give me a break! Nene apologizes, cries, and runs away, and all Rui and Emu are concerned about is her, because Nene's feelings take priority. Why? Because she turned on the waterworks? Tsukasa wasn't upset because the performance wasn't perfect. He was upset that they couldn't even get through it, and that they had to cut it off so abruptly, leaving the audience disappointed and unsatisfied. That was his concern here, and it's a completely valid one. Why is he being treated like he's crazy and overreacting? He's not. It doesn't help that the English translation changes Tsukasa saying our show to my show in an effort to paint him as more selfish and arrogant than he really is. Gotta make it extra obvious that Tsukasa was in the wrong, guys. Frankly, I don't even see why Rui ended the show the way he did. Was it because he couldn't come up with a good way to continue the story? What happened to that genius director brain? Was it because the robot fell on Tsukasa? Am I supposed to believe that the guy cares for Tsukasa's well-being? Why couldn't they have improv to get Nene Robot off of him? During the actual incident, Tsukasa improvs to keep the show going but needs to rely on Nene and Rui so that the show can go on. Emu adds in a helpful ad-lib, but then the robot crushes Tsukasa, something that Rui should absolutely feel incredibly guilty over. His invention caused this? But no, Rui just preemptively ends the show. Tsukasa relies on Rui and Rui lets him down. They could have made something up while Emu, Rui, and the mascot work to get the robot off of him, and it's not like they absolutely need Nene's song to continue the show from there. Rui alone made the decision to end the play without talking to anyone. He acted alone as usual, and there are absolutely zero consequences for it. No one calls him out for this, not even Tsukasa, when it was well within his right to. No, instead the writers make Tsukasa waste his time yelling at poor little Nene, who's done nothing bad ever, so they can unequivocally portray Tsukasa as in the wrong for making someone cry. And the thing is, when Tsukasa's yelling at Nene, he doesn't even sound mad. He sounds more upset and disappointed and hurt more than anything, which makes perfect sense to me. It's because he's yelling and doesn't sound as quiet and level-headed as Haruka that I'm not supposed to agree with him here. Tone doesn't invalidate what someone's saying, you know, no matter how much Project Sekai wants to make you think it does. Why is Tsukasa not allowed to be angry about their failure? Anger's not bad, and in this case I'd say it's justified. As for the other two people during this conflict, Emma is useless throughout the whole conflict because of course she is. In fact, she later makes it all about herself. She laments later that it's all her fault, that everyone's smiles are gone, and instead of going to talk to them, she just gives up. What happened to that girl who strong-armed her way to get everything she wanted? Why does she suddenly feel remorse about forcing everyone to do what she wanted? She had no trouble doing it with Tsukasa before. Similar to Nene, when the going gets tough, Rui gets going. The instant Rui doesn't like what he sees, he's out. And not only that, but of course he has to insult Tsukasa on his way out with his famous, "You cannot be a star." And Rui never apologizes for what he said either. He never once thinks about it again in both the main story and future stories. Either this means the writers forgot, or worse, they think Rui was justified in saying what he said. But Rui had no right to say that Tsukasa has no passion for shows, or that he cannot be a star. This is a big insult for Tsukasa, although Rui may not know the extent of how hard Tsukasa works. But Rui did see how hard and passionately and earnestly Tsukasa worked as he was following Rui's direction. But now Rui invalidates all of Tsukasa's efforts just because he didn't like the way Tsukasa said something? Rui also thinks he knows Tsukasa better than he actually does, so he thinks he has the right to say all of these things. He takes one look at Tsukasa and thinks he's got him pinned down. He's incredibly judgmental, and he never apologizes for any of this. And sure, Rui didn't know Tsukasa's background. He didn't know how deeply it would have affected Tsukasa, but you can tell what he said was meant to hurt, and it did. You can hear it in Tsukasa's voice and see it on his face. In episode 13, Tsukasa is visibly hurt. You can tell that he is, through his expression and his voice acting, and genuinely asks Rui why he thinks this. After all this, he still wants to talk to Rui. Tsukasa even admits later that Rui's words shook him. It's so strange because Tsukasa's flaw is deemed totally unacceptable, but I guess the other characters are fine? Tsukasa's issues are demonized, but the other characters? The world just needs to learn to accept them. Tsukasa is applied to such a higher moral standard than the other characters, and it's not fun to watch. Rui should not have been the one to tell Tsukasa that the best shows cannot be made alone. Rui even acknowledges how absurd it is. If it's absurd, why are you still doing it? From the very beginning, this dude has been more fixated on the technology of shows more than anything, not the synchronicity between the actors. Yet for some reason, he's the one telling Tsukasa that he can't make the best shows by himself. Rui, when that's all he's been doing for years, and that's what he goes back to doing right after. Are you serious? Finally, Tsukasa's on his own. For the first time after remembering Kaito's offer of help, Tsukasa willingly goes to Sekai. I feel like it speaks volumes that he feels that he has no one else to confide in, that he has to go to this random shady place he doesn't know and previously felt uncomfortable in for help.
Why are we still here?
Emu makes an appearance following the fight, and we get to hear her reasoning of why she wanted to form the troupe in the first place. Personally, it reads more as an attempt to gain sympathy from the audience. Am I supposed to forget how insufferable she's been this whole story? Is Tsukasa forced to forget this? The story wants to pretend as though Emu also has this two-sided duality like Tsukasa does. Like on one hand, she can be incredibly stubborn, but on the other hand, she can be incredibly selfless, perfectly willing to sacrifice her own happiness for the sake of others. There's this whole reveal after the main story conflict that the reason Emu is so attached to the stage is because she made a promise to her now deceased grandfather that she would protect it. My question is, why didn't she reveal this earlier? Tsukasa himself even asked this question in episode 15. Do you want to know what she says?
Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying? Oh my god. Stop fucking lying.
No, there were several moments when you could have told them, Emu. In episode 2, Emu says that she made a promise, and Tsukasa seems curious and wants to know why she did, and Emu never tells him! She could have come clean right here, and Tsukasa seemed open to it, but she doesn't. In episode 11, Emu teases why the stage is so important, but of course, she doesn't just reveal it. They didn't have time. What is she talking about? These odd attempts at padding out the reveal end up making feel Emu strangely out of character. Emu as a character should have no reason to hide any of this. So why did she not take either of these opportunities? It's because the writers wanted this big dramatic reveal that forces both the audience and Tsukasa to reevaluate Emu as a character and go, you know what? We were wrong for judging her earlier. It's so blatant it's almost insulting. Those 2 moments I listed, the writers didn't even have to write in a reveal there. Truthfully, they could have just done it at any point, but they made a deliberate decision not to. They just wanted to keep up the mystery of Emu's character and then make you feel bad for her later. According to Emu, Grandpa said that at least one person has to be dedicated to helping others shine, But that's not what she was doing! She didn't do anything! To insinuate that Emma was the person that stands on the sidelines to help out the others is blatantly untrue. Emma doesn't put others' needs first. She's not concerned about the people around her, she doesn't recognize her faults, she doesn't try to better herself, and she definitely doesn't extend empathy and compassion to others, letting them share their stories with her and offering a listening ear. In fact, we just established how she actively ignores what other people are saying if they're not of interest to her. Emma has the mind of a child, one who cannot comprehend that people exist outside of her, that they have their own wants, desires, and feelings. Well, we get to episode 15. Emma's lucky that Tsukasa hears her out at this point. Tsukasa shows a lot of compassion for this girl he barely knows and has done him so dirty. Now we gotta get Nene back. We first see her in episode 15, apologizing to her robot instead of her teammates. In episode 16, when they catch up to Nene, Tsukasa has to apologize first, because of course he does. Also, he's not a coward, unlike Nene, and can freely admit his faults. There's a moment where Nene's backstory kicks in, where she describes the terror of forgetting her lines, but it's so short, I can't get immersed in Nene's thoughts at all, so I hardly feel sympathy for her. It's literally just a black background with some dialogue. Inserting the reason for Nene's nervousness now of all times also reads as an annoying way to gain sympathy. She's been so horrible to Tsukasa this whole time, has no backbone, and now you're telling me I'm supposed to feel bad for her? Nene's rudeness is never addressed. I guess it's because I'm supposed to believe it's just a quirk of her character. Guys, I don't know who needs to hear this, but being rude to people on purpose isn't quirky, it's just rude. If she was being rude to her friends, then it would be a different story, but Tsukasa and Nene weren't friends by this point. Man didn't even know this girl. Nene had no right being as rude as she did, and she never apologizes for it. Once again, I'm reminded that while Nene's flaws are brushed off, Tsukasa's are thrust into the spotlight as something he needs to change right this instant, or he'll be alone forever. Heaven forbid Tsukasa be confident about himself and know his worth, because after the main conflict, he practically becomes a paragon of virtue, completely loyal to his team members, encouraging them without fail, always going along with whatever they want to do, and even giving up some precious opportunities to achieve his dream of stardom for them. Remember when Tsukasa gives up the show contest that they'd been building up for Emu's sake? Am I supposed to see this as a good thing? And then we get to Rui. Does Tsukasa have to be an all-benevolent being for Rui to accept Tsukasa? Someone who just accepts everything? Do you understand how uncomfortable these implications are? Nene touches on Rui's backstory a little, but she also mentions that he's waterboarded people before. In episode 9, Nene says that he's tried suspending his classmates from ropes in the gym, holding them underwater in the pool. Okay, can anyone name a show or performance where hanging people from ropes or holding them down in the pool would be absolutely necessary? Like, if I'm a 5-year-old kid sitting in the audience of one of Rui's shows, why on earth would I ever want to see someone actually drowning and fighting for their life? This is my problem with Rui. He gives virtually no justification for his decisions, and he can't, because like I said, there would be absolutely no situation where any of these stunts would be necessary, and then when someone disagrees with him, he takes off. You cannot have a conversation with this person. Rui, you are 16 to 17 at this point, and you still don't know how to properly talk things out with people? And this would be fine if the story acknowledged it as a flaw, but it doesn't. No, it's Kasa's fault. It's everyone else's fault for not supporting Rui unconditionally. Is this a joke? Am I actually supposed to like him and want him back? He can leave for all I care. He's done nothing but look smug and cause issues. In episode 17, Nene says the problem is that Rui gets too absorbed in his shows and loses sight of everything else. No, the problem is that Rui has no issues causing bodily harm to people he considers his classmates and people who do shows with him, all for the sake of the greatest show ever. Do you know what a terrible mentality this is to have? To go so far for a great show that you're actively willing to harm people for it, or at the very least put them in such danger? And this is coming from the character who supposedly cares about other people and forming connections and making friends so much? But contradictions like these are why I can't buy it. Let's take a moment to look at this timeline. We spend episodes 1 to 12 of the main story forming the troupe, establishing their dynamics, and their first performance. Episode 13 was the aftermath of the performance and the fallout of the argument. Tsukasa takes episode 14 to figure out his feelings. Emu and Nene get 1 episode each to rejoin the troupe. And then, Rui's melodrama makes up the rest of the conflict for the story. Why? Why go through all this effort for him? Is it because they've become friends? That can't be it. Throughout their whole time together, Rui sees Tsukasa as nothing more than something interesting and a way to achieve his goals. Tsukasa also views Rui as a way to achieve his goals. Their relationship is transactional. At best, they're coworkers, not really friends. The show needs to work harder if I'm supposed to believe they're friends. And it needs to justify Rui's inclusion in the main cast more, because when I look at everything Rui brings to the table, it's just not worth it, man. Did they want Rui back because he was that good of a director? Even if I were to believe that Rui was that good, and I have my doubts, surely there are other directors around? Heck, Tsukasa himself is clearly capable of directing his own screenplay. Sure, their shows may not have any fancy gadgets, but that's not necessarily what makes a good show. So why does it have to be Rui specifically? In episode 9, we see that Rui sucks at directing Tsukasa properly and makes him waste his energy uselessly. All he has to say about Tsukasa's performance is vague and not very pointed. The vibes, man. You'd think that as their director he'd have more to say than that, so they go to Sekai. In episode 10, we see that Kaito, made from Tsukasa's true feelings, does a much better job at directing, and Tsukasa is immediately able to understand what his performance is missing. They have Kaito, they have Tsukasa himself, of whom Kaito was made from, so why do they need Rui again? In episode 17, we see that Rui doesn't care about the conflict between Tsukasa and Nene, but decides that he and Tsukasa aren't compatible because of it. Because of an argument that wasn't even with him. Because Tsukasa had a disagreement with someone. What? Shouldn't it be more impressive that they were able to work things out, if anything? What does Rui want? An obedient doll who never disappoints him? Is this why he only sticks to robots? Because they always do whatever he says and cannot, by nature, disobey or doubt him? Nene herself even admits that what Tsukasa said was true. Rui is not the guardian, protector, big brother figure he thinks he is. That role belongs to Tsukasa and Tsukasa alone. Rui is doing this for selfish reasons that have nothing to do with Nene. Rui decides that this argument with Tsukasa means that Tsukasa is only driven by popularity, but how can he know this? Like, it feels like Rui's saying that he's better than Tsukasa in a way. It comes across as incredibly condescending. Tsukasa is about to let Rui go, as he should in my opinion, because why should he have to beg Rui to come back? But Nene and Emu insist that they have to find a way to get Rui to come back. In episode 18, we see flashbacks of kids saying mean stuff to Rui. Don't care, they were probably right, judging from Rui's behavior. Like, after everything I've learned about this guy, you expect me to believe that no, he actually cares about his friends and wants connections when everything else about him says otherwise? That these kids were not well within their rights to stay away from this guy? The reasoning for why Rui came back was also weird to me. Tsukasa explains his reasoning through a play. I get it, this is how Rui and Tsukasa tend to communicate, but here, Tsukasa communicates his true feelings by basically just word vomiting them exactly as they are. I don't know why this needed to be in a play to get through to Rui. Tsukasa has one line about smiles, his sick sister, and valuing his friends, and suddenly Rui is completely on board again? Wasn't he just about ready to drop Tsukasa like a hot potato? What happened? Instead of gratefully accepting the invitation, Rui disparages Tsukasa's monologue, which contains his precious true feelings that gave birth to a whole Sekai, by the way, and says that they should think of a way to make his performance more expressive. Don't you get it, guys? This was Rui's way of saying he'll come back. Oh, go away! You do not have the right to act this smug, not after everything. Remember, Nene was the one who was insistent that Rui actually wanted to be part of a team, not Rui himself.
でも本当はルイも
How do you know that, Nene? When was the last time you had an actual meaningful conversation with this dude? Elementary school? Yeah, that's what I thought. I think I needed to see more of Rui's perspective to buy that. No, he actually wanted to rejoin them all along, because otherwise, it looks as though Rui just dropped his grudge pretty quickly for no real reason after that. So what, Rui doesn't follow through on his words? Is this supposed to make me like him? Because I can actively feel my respect for him decrease. Rui seems to think that by becoming a troupe, they're immediately friends, but Tsukasa seems to think that by becoming a troupe, they're just working together. By making Tsukasa in the wrong, are they trying to paint Rui in the right? Why do they have to be friends just because they're working with each other? Why are they not allowed to have boundaries with each other? Also, even if you're friends with someone, you can have boundaries with them. Like, you could have Rui learn to separate work and friendship. You don't necessarily have to like the person to work with them. What he's doing, isolating himself, excommunicating himself, painting himself to be the victim, is immature and should be treated as such. Rui should have taken this failure as an opportunity to grow on his end. He could have learned that no matter how great and advanced his robots are, it won't mean anything if he doesn't have actors and their prowess to back it up. Good technology can't make up for bad acting, or lack of acting in Nene's case. Nene wasn't able to get on stage and make up for the error, which to me felt like the crux of the issue. I want to see Rui's thoughts. I want to see him actively put aside his biases and judgmental thinking to give Tsukasa a second chance. I want him to acknowledge that yes, I was hurt in the past, and that's why I'm so quick to distrust others, but things can be different now. I shouldn't dismiss someone just because they made one mistake, and this sort of self-reflection can take years. Honestly, maybe the story would have been even more interesting if Wonderland Showtime hadn't gotten back together by the end of the story. Maybe one of their event story arcs could have been Rui lingering on the sidelines, going through his own personal growth until he's ready to come back to them. Don't make Tsukasa do the chasing either. Have Wonderland Showtime always be open to Rui, but have Rui ultimately be the one who seeks them out. I think this would force Rui to grow a lot more and grapple with who he is as a person. Really get him to question why his knee-jerk reaction is to dismiss people when they fall short of his standards, and then ultimately attempt to overcome this. And you could still have him struggle to reconnect with the group afterward and not make things go back to the status quo. Maybe you could have the troupe go overboard in an attempt to make Rui feel welcome. Maybe have Tsukasa feel uncomfortable saying no to what Rui wants in the fear that he'll leave again. Have Emu struggle to open up to the troupe with her worries even more in the fear that Rui will leave. I don't know, I'm just throwing ideas out here. You know how I said earlier that Tsukasa's character was intriguing for a number of reasons, one of them being that he supposedly forgot his true feelings, and that I was eager to find out why? Yeah, that never happens. We never actually get to see why or how Tsukasa forgot his feelings. Tsukasa's outbursts, temper problems, never brought up again. His issue of not valuing his team members is never brought up again either. He never seems to struggle with it after that. He takes all of Wonderland Showtime's antics in stride, and he's always spouting their praises unfailingly after their conflict. Does this mean that it was just a one-time thing? Did the writers forget about this? Hey, maybe the writers made Tsukasa not only forget his true feelings, but also forget that he had issues with this too. You can see the writer's hand every single time they need to make Wonderland Showtime stay together, and it's painful. In episode 2, we find out that Tsukasa didn't pass the interview, because of course he didn't, and the only reason that he's still here is because of Emu. This game has to let you know that he can't succeed without his future friends by his side, after they teach him the magic of friendship. What is this, My Little Pony? Actually, I won't put any disrespect on that show. It was a great show. In episode 19, they put on a show, and it's a success, because of course it is! You see, now they all have the same desire to make people smile, which translates into a spectacular show! The story is filled with so many things that feel forced. This doesn't feel like a group that organically formed at all, and these dynamics feel so forced and weird. I don't get the sense that any of them have reached any sort of real understanding with one another by the end of it. They really just feel like coworkers who perform together sometimes. Spoiler alert, this does not change with future event stories. Nene straight up says that she can't remember when they became friends. In universe, she acknowledges that she doesn't even know when it happened. You can't remember, Nene? Well, neither can I, and I've been following you guys for years, waiting for the day that you guys would get to that level, but Nene just says it happened along the way. She's the worst liar I've ever seen. What friendship? Don't get me wrong, Wonderland Showtime does have some cute moments, like in episode 20. I want to like the cute moments with Tsukasa and Emu, but considering everything I've just talked about, I can't. I want to believe they're friends, I really do, but I just can't. It's really weird when you compare them to the other groups too. Most of the other groups aren't really friends by the end of the main story either. It takes time for them to get there, but their friendship grows organically. They had good soil that allowed their friendship to bloom. In comparison, Wonderland Showtime gets you nothing but weeds by the end of it. The main story really just left a bad taste in my mouth and completely soured Wonderland Showtime's dynamic for me. Oh, but it gets better from here, you might be thinking, but it absolutely does not. In fact, the main story sets up the precedent for what is to come. The whole group gets to reconnect with their inner child and fulfill their old, washed-up dreams that they thought would never come true with the help of their friends, at the expense of everyone else. Tsukasa, Emu's brothers, her father, the workers of the theme park, no one is safe from the inherent selfishness of the group. There's a constant message of, it's not our fault, it's everyone else that needs to change. Not just here, but in future stories, and it's disgusting to read. That's not how the world works. No one's going to change for you. No one's going to dress up their tone and make you feel better, especially when you've done something wrong. Wouldn't you rather someone be honest in their criticisms to help you see reality for what it is, that life's not just some fairy tale, instead of lying to your face to make you feel better? Isn't that indicative of a truer, more authentic relationship? Wonderland Showtime says no, and this is something I just can't get behind. Wonderland Showtime's main story left me feeling empty, drained, and tired. I absolutely dreaded rewatching it to make this video. I sincerely hope I will never have to watch it again.